So we have talked about how to graduate, and certainly if you have any questions about your credits, please let me know. We've also talked a little bit about banking. In this lesson, we're going to start talking about budgeting and how to interpret your paycheck, because obviously you need to know how much money you're making in order to make a budget. And then the next topic that we will be getting to, their next big topic, would be some career exploration. So, lesson objectives. The essential question for today is how to budget for the lifestyle that you want. By the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to interpret a paycheck. Now, the reason that we're breaking it down like this is how much you make. For example, when you sign on and you get a salary, you don't get to bring all of that money home. You get some of that money goes out for taxes and for other things that we'll talk about shortly. So it's really important to be able to interpret your paycheck and understand how much money you're actually going to be bringing home in order to make a good personal budget. And this will be meeting PA Core Standards 13.3.11.d, which has to do with developing a personal budget. The overarching goal is that you will choose a career that meets your own personal goals and that you will have the financial means to do the things that you want and need to do in your life. Some basic vocabulary that we're going to be talking about today. The first is a paycheck stub, and that is kind of obvious, but we're going to start there. And then we'll go into gross pay and net pay. And those two terms, I'll tell you, a lot of adults have problems or mistake or mix up the two. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to talk about the deductions that you might see on a paycheck, including your federal tax amount, your local taxes, security, Social Security, and Medicare. So let's jump right in. When you get a paycheck, often you will have a paycheck mailed to you or your employer will give it to you. Sometimes it's every Friday, sometimes it's twice a month, sometimes it's monthly. Nowadays, most checks or most pay stubs you get don't actually have any check in them. They are just a detailed accounting of how much money you made and where the different amounts went. Most people have their money directly deposited into a bank. Now, there's a couple benefits to doing that. One, of course, the money goes directly there. You don't have to take time to go to a bank and kind of old school hand it in and have them deposit it and get money back. And the second thing is, I mean, most people do almost all of their finances online now. So the pay stub that you'll be getting won't be actually worth anything, but it is very important to look over each time you get it and make sure that your employer didn't make any mistakes. So let's start with gross pay. Gross pay is all the money that you make. That is the total dollar amount that your employer tells you that you're making. For example, if your employer says that you make $8 an hour, the gross pay is $8 an hour, which is about $16,000 a year. Just a quick tip, if you take the dollar amount and double it, that is approximately how much that is yearly. So an $8 an hour job is approximately $16,000 a year. A $20 an hour job is approximately $40,000 a year. Just as a very quick reference for you, just to kind of juggle the numbers in your head when you're trying to figure out if that money is the amount of money you need to make. Okay, back to gross pay. Gross pay is that bottom line. So if your employer says that you're making $16,000 a year, well, that's your gross pay. But probably what's more important is your net pay, because your net pay is what you're actually putting in your pocket. Your net pay is what is left after you've paid out your Social Security, you've paid out the Medicare, you've paid out the taxes. That is how much that you are bringing home. And whenever you're making a budget, it is critically important. Let me repeat this, critically important to make your budget based on your net pay, not your gross pay, because your net pay is less, but that is the actual amount of money that you have in your pocket or in the bank account. That is what your employer is actually giving you at the end of the day when everything else has been taken out of your paycheck. So we've already talked a little bit about W-2 and a W-4 form. Well, when you're first hired by your employer, you fill out a W-4. And this form covers any taxes and it determines how many deductions are going to be taken out of your pay. if you're not sure how to do this or what to do, I mean, the way I did it is literally I asked my human resources person, what do you recommend or what do most single people, I gave them my situation at that time, what did they do? And they will be able to help guide you through it. So please, if you're filling out your first forms after you get a job and you're not sure what to do, just ask. And there's also a lot of things on the web that will help you. But I mean, if you ask them, they'll tell you that most people put in this many deductions when they're single or if they have a child or if, depending whatever your situation is. So the federal tax amount is that comes out first. That is how much is taken out each paycheck, and that goes to our federal government. The state tax is less than your federal taxes, and this depends a lot on your state of residence. Some states don't even have this. Pennsylvania does, so you will see that come out of your paychecks if you're working in Pennsylvania, but it's not a lot of money, not like the federal. Um, so this amount you'll also see taken out of your paycheck. Local taxes are a little bit funny in that sometimes you have to pay local taxes for where you live and where you work. So local taxes, and that's something else that your human resources person is going to be able to help you out with. But we pay local taxes, and for example, I pay local taxes for the Exton office where I mainly work. I pay them for Lancaster County because I have another part-time job in Lancaster County, and then I also pay them in Berks County. So you can end up paying local taxes several different places if you work in a different county or a different city from where you live. However, this amount is also not that much. So, it's a couple of dollars here, and that tax goes to help some of the local things that I do benefit from. So I take that as, I certainly don't mind paying my part in taxes because I get to benefit directly from those taxes. So you've probably heard a lot about Social Security, especially recently. It's been in the news. A lot of politicians talk about Social Security. The federal government requires every employee to have a certain percentage of their paycheck withheld for Social Security purposes. The initial idea of this was that if I started working back in 1970 and I had a certain percentage of my paycheck put aside, that when I retire, when I'm in my 60s, that I would have that money, and that money would be able to give me a Social Security check that I would be able to then live off of. The reason I mention this, first of all, because Social Security is taken out of your paycheck. The second thing is, please, I beg of you, consider investing money outside of the Social Security system. Even if when you are 18, if you put $10 a week when you get your first job, or if you have a job then, $10 a week, if you just put that aside into a savings account, that will greatly help you because most people believe that by the time you guys hit retirement, or even by the time I hit retirement, the Social Security as we know it might be quite different. So what you need to know for these purposes is one, we do still pay Social Security, and two, it is just so critically important for you to start your own savings. And much like Social Security, we have Medicare. And you've probably heard about people that were on Medicare. Maybe you know somebody. And all employees pay, it's only 1.45%, about 1.5% of your paycheck, but we pay, and this helps people who need these benefits. So it's just another piece that comes out of my paycheck and then helps, but there could be a time when I need it, or perhaps somebody that you know needs that in order to, help them live a quality life. Something I always like to take a look at is my year to date. You can, on a paycheck, in addition to all the things that they take out, you can also see your year to date, and that tells you how much pay you've made and how much has been taken out. And it's just kind of nice because it can help you, especially if you're trying to budget for monthly expenses. If you have a job that doesn't always pay you the same, let's say you're hourly and you don't always get the same paycheck. Well, what you could do is take a look at your month to date and kind of get an average. So you could take a look at the last 10 months, how much you've made total, divide that by 10, and then you would get an average of how much money you make a month, and that can help you budget because you certainly don't want to set up a budget based on the month that you made the most money, because what if you don't make that much again? And you also don't want to make it on the least because you might be scrimping and saving, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you might be doing that more than you need to because there are other monies that generally come in. And just like texting, there are lots of abbreviations on a paycheck. If you are not sure what they are, certainly you can do a Google search and that will usually help you if you say paycheck and then put it in. But some of the most common are they abbreviate year to date, federal tax or federal tax withheld, state tax withheld, Social Security tax withheld, and Medicare tax withheld can be either MWT or MED usually. So there are a lot of abbreviations, and that's usually what throws people off. But once you understand what those abbreviations are, it all makes sense as to where that money is going. So let's summarize. We talked a lot about the money that goes into and comes out of your paycheck. The two words that I want to make sure that you understand, because again, a lot of people get these confused. Gross pay is the how much your employer says they're going to pay you. It is the yearly amount that comes out, like when you have a contract, let's say this is how much you get paid. But the net pay is really what is important because that is how much money you actually bring home, how much you have to actually spend on the things that you want. So always keep in mind when you're making a budget, you're making it using your net pay. And as always, keep in mind that if you have any questions whatsoever, you can text me, you can call me, you can email me, you can message me directly in Schoology.